Hi guys, my name is Olga Noel and I make bulk jointed dolls. Today, as promised, we are going to talk about LaDoll. This is a deep dive with tools from this previous video. I will share my own experience with LaDoll, show you how I work with it for efficiency, although there is not much of it at the beginning and I feel frustrated a lot, but then I get it. You'll see. It's a bit limiting for me to use only the tools I mentioned for the beginners, but let's treat it as an experiment. As I mentioned, you'll need water to work with LaDoll, and in order to be a bit on the efficient side, I decided to make something that I need. You know, I made resin girls a while back. Here they are, and I'm going to learn how to cast them myself soon. So I will be making a new faceplate for my resin girls. This will be one of the faces for my patrons to decide upon whether we cast her or some other face, but she will become an option. By the way, if you want to take part in the votes, see content early, and just support me and my art like these beautiful people do, join us. Links in the description, as always. And now, as we open the new pack of LaDoll Premix, let's start our review of the material. Right off the bat, the familiar feel of smooth surface. It's a bit moist and my hands have no residue even after rubbing the side quite aggressively. Now we're taking it out of the packaging. It is still smooth, the mix is very good, a bit sticky. My hands feel already a little bit dry-ish. And I would say it feels a little bit like a dog's nose, but without those good doggy nosy qualities. Just really smooth and moist. Let's tear up a piece. And this is the hairiness that I mentioned in my previous video. You can see that it is a little bit like sticking out. I already feel dryness on my fingers. I'm really not a fan of this feeling of the moisture being sucked out of me, but it is very comfortable right out of the packaging. It is very comfortable to knead, to work with, but I'm still unhappy. So let's tear a bigger piece out of the mass and one more and compare it to the face that I am going to replace. As you can see, the amount of clay that I tore is quite a bit bigger, but let's leave it as is just in case and pack everything else back to its original packaging and into the Ziploc bag. The Ziploc bag will protect the moisture from evaporating from LaDoll, and this hand cream is going to protect my hands because I hate dry hands. LaDoll is already moist right out of the packaging, but in order to make it a little bit more pliable, I immediately dunk it in water and knead it. This thing that I'm doing here, attaching raw LaDoll to a polymer clay head base, is going to bite me in the butt a little bit later. As I already mentioned, LaDoll has quite a shrinkage rate and it's not going to stay the same when I'm sculpting. 5 to 7% for this scale is a bit much, but we'll make it work. Also, don't repeat sculpting the same way I do here. I know that I promised you the beginner's demonstration, but I forgot how to work with LaDoll, and this thought honestly came to me just now. I would rather have a base here underneath the LaDoll and make LaDoll layer much thinner. Firm base such as foil, as I do for polymer clay, will actually quite successfully prevent your LaDoll from shrinking that much, because LaDoll cannot possibly shrink foil inside, especially if you packed it real good. But also don't overdo it. If you put foil inside, you will need to take it out, and if you pack it real tight, it's going to be a nightmare to take out. But I'm stupid and I totally forgot about this, so I'm just making thick layers and it's going to take 48 hours to dry completely. And spoiler, it is going to shrink a lot. The base of the skull is already sculpted with polymer clay and I'm just sculpting the front of the face. I'm going to fumble a bit, please forgive me for that, but I haven't worked with LaDoll for a really long time, so I'm sort of reacquainting myself with material. So the base layer is done, and now we are taking some silk thread and separating our base plane into two symmetrical parts, vertically while pushing on the thread with a cuticle pusher and sort of making this indentation, and then two horizontal ones, one for the eyes and one for the mouth. People usually put 3 of them for eyes, nose, and mouth, and sometimes people are really technical about it, like measuring things. But because I'm so acquainted with a face and I've created a lot of faces over the years and 10 variations of this particular faceplate, I already know where the eyes, the nose, and the mouth should be, and I'm doing it just to stay on top of proportions. The material is a little bit dry already and it sticks to everything, but with a little bit of water, you can clean everything and bring back this smoothness. Here I work with wooden cuticle pusher. I haven't modified it with scalpel yet, but I'll do that a little bit later in the process, so be on the lookout for that, and sculpt with a lot of water involved. My favorite sculpting technique, and the technique that comes in handy while I sculpt and aim for symmetry, is adding equal parts, equal blobs of clay to opposite sides of the face or the body, as you could have seen here, and smooth it out. As you probably remember, I mentioned LaDoll slushy. In order to not run into this problem, I sometimes wipe the instrument, or like the excess water from the instrument, on my hands, or you can see a tissue on the background. I sometimes do that, and I do it in order not to oversaturate the material that is already in Sculpt. Here I'm evening out everything, and in order for every single layer, or rather every single extra bit of clay to stick to the base layer, I will use a really old flat brush and some water. I'm wiping off some excess and just start going over every single blob that I've added to the base layer. Now you see me using a hand drill, and you can use it not only with bits, but you can also use it with needles, as I'm going to do here. This needle is quite big, but I really need some pointy action to happen for the mouth. Also, I mentioned that the brush is old, and I have snapped the end a while back because I sat on it. I didn't keep the broken bit, but the end of the brush is now used as a sculpting tool. It really resembles wooden cuticle pushers, but it is a little bit longer and a little bit stiffer. And here comes the worst part about sculpting with LaDoll: the film that is on top of your hands. This is so icky. I don't know. I wiped my hands here and I didn't go wash them, but usually for the sake of my sanity, I go and wash them multiple times and I reapply hand cream because I cannot. And here comes the fun part. As I promised you, a little bit of shaping, or rather reshaping, of the cuticle pusher. I'm making it a little bit pointy here, but I honestly could have gotten away with just using the drill bit with a needle. I don't know why I didn't do that, but a little bit later I will show you a really truly unique shape that I have created and that I'm going to use for years to come. The only downside to making your own cuticle pusher instrument is that the wood that they use to make the cuticle pusher is a little bit soft. This is a good thing because in this case, you can easily shape and reshape them multiple times, but it is also a little bit sad because if you use it with LaDoll and you expose it to a lot of water, the ends become a little bit soggy and it might lose its sharpness. So you will resharpen it and you will make it a little bit shorter. Also, another of my favorite parts, sculpting with a scalpel. I like it because it creates really sharp edges and folds. And here I show you that the piece of LaDoll that I tore away from the big chunk is already dry. And if I want to revive it, it is possible to just use water on it, or in this case, I think it will be easier to just reknead it into the bigger chunk that is still wet. Here you can see me adding more clay to the face with the features that are not yet defined, but that are already there. And I add ears, and now you see that the base is all dried up, because ear is wet and it's not sticking to the base layer. The thing we can do in this case is score the base layer a little bit. I do it with a broken end of my brush and then I try to reattach the ear. It's not its proper placement, so I'm trying to fix that, and now it looks a little bit better. The other side, again scoring and putting the fresh bit of clay so that it is sticking there a little bit better, and also adding some water so that everything would be nice and moist again. Now I work on the lip crease with cuticle pusher again, and I start defining every single feature a little bit better. You can see that I don't really work on one particular feature at a time. I always move through the face trying to find harmony in every single feature, and I'm not stopping for too long on an eye or on the mouth or on the nose, because if I stop and if I start defining some feature particularly well, I will neglect everything else and there is a higher chance that I will create a perfect nose but for a different face, not for this particular one. At this point, I've been sculpting for a couple of hours already, so the base layer starts to really feel the dryness, and in order for me to keep working, I create a new cuticle pusher form. I constantly recreate them or make things that I feel are necessary at any particular moment, and I moisturize the face a lot. I'm not doing that just out of necessity for the whole thing to be moist, but also I want to even out some scratches and bumps, and sometimes it really helps to just run them over with some wet flat brush. The biggest difference, and what I really do not like about LaDoll compared to polymer clay, now I'm sculpting lips, the whole thing feels a little bit less smooth. I don't know, maybe it's me, maybe it's my lack of practice with LaDoll, but I also feel that with polymer clay I can go into much deeper detail compared to what I get with LaDoll. The material itself is a little bit slippery, and when I add those eyelids, for example, I feel that I do not fully control where the fold is going compared to polymer clay. When I want to make a fold with polymer clay, the material is a little bit more resistant, so to say. And when I do the same thing with LaDoll, if I make LaDoll more moist, the slightest change in the pressure and your eyelid is completely ruined. Oh, look, my favorite part is coming. This is where I shape this cuticle pusher into a truly unique shape. So this is sort of like a spoon-y form. I made it because I got really frustrated trying to sculpt the eyes and the eyelids in the way that is more comfortable to me. And I understood that the back of the sculpting tool that I created is a little bit rough. The good thing is, if you take a piece of sanding paper, the rougher the better for this, and you just run the back of the sculpting tool several times against the sanding paper, you're going to get a very smooth surface. And I continue using this tool, this particular one, all through the rest of the sculpt because it really helps. It has this natural curve that can create a lot of useful shapes and that can get into a lot of useful crevices and create a lot of useful crevices. Right now you can see that I'm almost done, and everything I do now is just torturing basically the sculpt that is created. I feel that at this point you can really put her aside, but I'm not recognizing it here because I haven't worked with LaDoll for a long time, and I keep hoping to see the result I get when I finished first sculpting session with polymer clay, which is not really ideal, and I should recognize that it's a different material, and I understand that if I oversaturate it I can't sculpt, and when I undersaturate it, it becomes a bit crumbly and flaky and hard to manipulate. So I just keep going over it time and time again, and it's not really helping. But at this point I recognize that I haven't sculpted her ears yet. The details there, they are not going to be final, thank God. The placement is a little bit off, the shape is a little bit off, and I am already tired of trying to push clay and it not cooperating. But I really fought with this last step. I ran over it with a flat brush again and put it aside to dry for a little while. I knew that it will take more than 24 hours, and indeed it took 48 hours overall, and it is dry and it shrank. I'm sorry I didn't measure it like the way when it was wet versus the way when it was dry, but 5% sounds about right here. The next thing I do is I sand the surface with a sanding paper. Its grade is 400. I didn't go higher because I didn't see the point there, and you'll see why. It is very important to remember to have a face mask on while you're sanding. You don't want to dirty your lungs, and the process is fairly simple and tedious. I use finger gloves here because I don't want to ruin my manicure. In here you can see how this hairiness has returned because I started disrupting the surface with the sanding paper. It happens, but it is fairly easy to fix. As soon as you're happy with the result that you got from sanding paper, you can just take a wet cloth and run over every single bump and lump. The pressure is relatively mild, but you need to make sure not to touch the gentlest areas. For example, eyelids or nostrils. These ones are easier to do with flat brush, as I do here. And this is the result after the first sculpting session is complete. I did 3 goes after that, 1 to 2 hours each. I won't be including every single thing here because I feel that you won't get anything out of it because I kept torturing I kept torturing the material because I couldn't find a perfect match with it. But in the end, this is the result that I got. This is the faceplate I'm going to offer to my patrons to choose whether she's going to be casted or not. Join me there if you want to take part in it. If you like the explanation, the face, the video, and my videos in general, please click the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and come back in a week or so to see the third part and the final one, polymer clay faces. Thank you guys for watching. Special thank you to my patrons. You keep my days bright, and see you next time. Bye!